For the 5,000th episode of RHAP as a podcast, I wanted to do something big. So I got a hold of the powers that be at CBS and I said, hey, can we get Jeff Probst back on RHAP as a podcast? And surprisingly, they said yes. For 30 minutes, you can talk to Jeff Probst. So I'm about to record my first proper sit down interview with Jeff Probst on the podcast since 2012. But the last time I interviewed Jeff, it was on the red carpet of the Survivor Winners at War premiere, and it didn't go great. All right, we are here with the legendary host of Survivor, Jeff Probst. Jeff, how are you?
Do you like me at all?
So I've been spending the last few weeks thinking about how do I maximize those 30 minutes with Jeff Probst, and you're about to see how it goes. All right, what a treat this is to have back with us. So excited to catch up with, of course, the host, the executive producer of Survivor, the host of On Fire with Jeff Probst. Here is, of course, the great Jeff Probst. Jeff, how are you?
Well, first, I'd just like to say, now that I understand what it takes to make a podcast, I have even more respect for what you've been doing for the last many years.
Thank you so much. Always appreciate that. How are you doing?
I'm doing great. Look at my life. I got one dog here, one at my feet. I'm talking to you. We got a new season of Survivor coming up. Life is good.
Yeah, I feel like I don't hear you talk too much about your dogs.
Well, you know why? Because I'm new. Here's the short version. I didn't want a dog. We have a big life. We had 2 kids living in the house. We like to go places and do things. I travel. And one day I could just tell with my wife, Lisa, we were getting a dog. And it changed my life. And then we got a second dog. And now I am that guy that's like, well, could we take him? What if we got a bus and then we got in a boat? We could put him in a carrier. Yeah. I'm annoying, but man, they changed my whole life. I'm full dog all the time now.
Yeah, you're into it now.
Yeah, really into it. For real. I mean, I know it sounds corny because anybody who has a dog, or I'm sure a cat, will say, yeah, welcome to the club. But the unconditional love and the joy that they bring into your life is pretty crazy.
Very relatable. Jeff, so many different things that I want to talk to you about, but I'm so appreciative that you made the time, that this is going to be the 5,000th episode of RHAP as a podcast. And
wow.
It just was very meaningful for me to have you come on here, because I feel like that so much of what I've been able to do in my life is because of Survivor. And of course, you are Survivor. So it was just such a thing that was really special for me. So thank you so much for doing this.
I'm honored, for real. Let's get into it. Let's do it. Let's make it a good one.
Okay, good. So I would just love to talk a little bit about, I just was trying to think of, we had this time and I was just really trying to think about like big picture, and I didn't want to do a ton of like, but when are you going to bring back this thing? And I just wanted to talk about like, just like the body of work of the show. And the thing that, like, in thinking of the history of the show, which has been, such an obsession of mine for over the years, was that you had this really these 2 things that I came back to, of the pandemic and streaming, which I think have really shaped the show in an interesting way to where it is right now. And I guess let me start with the pandemic, because that was just this like black swan event that really took a year away from the show, but really created like a space for you to have time away, for the team to have time away. I would just love to know, in retrospect, how do you feel like the pandemic really changed Survivor?
Well, feel free to jump in, because that is a giant question. And I think you hit on it. It really did shift us in so many ways. I think, there's so many parts of it. Here are the parts, and then you can tell me how you want to explore it. There is the break that we got creatively, which I didn't really realize we needed. There was the shift in tone that came directly from everything we went through as a country, that the globe went through, as an entire culture. And then I think there was the rediscovery of the show, or the discovery of the show, by young people, and especially kids who found it during COVID when there was nothing to do but, watch TV. So those are 3 big chunks. Where do you want to start?
I guess I would start with maybe like the way that it shaped the way that the creative team might have viewed the show in terms of like having the time away.
Yeah. Well, so after Winners at War, that was designed to be the end of that era. And the reason for that is we honestly felt that, you played that there's a certain point where the players have figured out so many of the possible angles we could bring that they were gaming the game and we didn't know if we could sustain it in that version. And so when it was over, we decided let's go into Winners at War. Excuse me. We decided let's go into Winners at War and make it as great as we can. And every single player that we brought back brought it. I could feel it from the beginning that they were in on it with us. We're going to make this season amazing. We threw everything, Edge of Extinction, everything, fire tokens, everything we could to just give the players things to play with. And I know a lot of times fans will say, why this, why that? It's because we want the players to have things that they can use in some way to demand or command or influence the game. So we did that and we brought it on our end and we were exhausted. That is not a woe is me. It felt good. We felt like we did everything we could in that season. And so when it was over, Rob, honestly, just speaking for myself, I didn't realize how tired I was. And so in a way, COVID gave us this break to step back and look at the show and say, okay, where could we take it instead of rushing into a new era? And that really pivoted us. And we had time to sit back and start thinking about it.
Yeah, and while like it was so terrible for so many people, it came at like really like a perfect time for you guys to have that break in terms of like you could have had it after like some random season
Yeah,
where it wouldn't have made any sense or before Winners at War, but it's just it was like in some ways very fortuitous for the show to be able to have that
you're
time
right.
off right after Winners at War.
You're right. I mean, I know that, but I never really thought of it the way you just framed it. And you're absolutely right. We were fortunate to have such an unfortunate thing happen when
Yes.
it did. And I'll tell you why else we were fortunate is because I had a terrible idea for Survivor 41.
Yeah.
I wanted it to be this economy based world, and I had spent a lot of time on it. Fortunately, the great Mike White
Yes.
asked me a simple question: does that sound fun? And that shifted things. And that really was the pivot. Like Matt Van Wagenen and I would just get on the phone and I would just pace around the garage and we would say dangerous fun. And we just came up with this list. But what was really happening, Rob, is I think what you're getting at is it it like refueled us energetically. And I feel like, and I know maybe I was over the top with Survivor 41 and the
Yeah.
Open, but I could probably recite that still today. It was so personal to me. And I remember saying to myself, I'm going to say, I've missed you because I had. And I knew I was speaking for our team. We had missed it. We just needed to take a little bit of a break, rehydrate. But I meant it because that relationship with the people who watch our show goes so far beyond a fan.
Yeah.
You've experienced it. You've now basically gone from somebody who watched it to being a player to somebody who talks about it. So you've experienced the triangle of it all.
Yeah. And I totally get that from you. And it comes across that I think that many people like in your position, hosting this show for now we're in what, 24 years of you being the
Right.
host of the show, that I think that a lot of people would be phoning it in from this point. And, that if people ever have criticisms, it's that you have so much that you're trying to get in there. It's not like that you're trying to pull back ever at all.
Yeah. Well, I don't like talking about fellow people who do this kind of job, but I see the phoning it in a lot of people I know. And they kind of look at it like I landed the greatest gig. I work this many days. I make this much money. It allows me a lot of time to travel. I don't look at Survivor like that at all. I feel I have stress streams about Survivor because I want to do my job. I want to do my part. And that means bringing a point of view to the show. We have never said ever we thought our idea was the right idea or the only idea. Somebody else would come in and do this show a completely different way. There would be a whole new team. All we ever do, Rob, is commit. And we decide if we're going to do it, then we're doing it. And this is what we're doing. And we have to know in advance, because I like symmetry. Anybody on our team knows I like ideas that flow. And I used to get pitched ideas all the time for seasons. You could name your season this. And I would say, but it would end at the merge, or it wouldn't be there at the end. And we look for these like capsules that we can sort of say, okay, this was Winners at War. This was Island of the Idols. What if you had players that were gods? Whatever it is, Ghost Island. What if it was a haunted island? You can sit back and criticize things you didn't like. We totally get it. We do the same thing. But when you're in the creative part of our team, it's full tilt. Full tilt. Let's
Full
go.
tilt boogie. Yeah.
Full tilt boogie.
How do you just keep up that passion for it after all this time? And you've seen it all and you've done it so many different ways, that what drives you to keep going back to it and, have that love for what you get to do?
This will be the most boring answer, but this is the truth. It is the exact same thing, Rob. The exact same thing that when I heard Mark Burnett 24 years ago on the Jonathan Brandmeier radio show talking about abandoning 16 people, I thought about, what are they going to do? How are they going to do that? How are they going to live together and get rid of each other? That's going to be really complicated to do. That's still what drives me, human behavior. And you just said, I've seen it all. I haven't. Episode 1 of Survivor 46, never saw that.
Mm-hmm.
There's things happening in that episode that you go, oh my God, once again, a player surprises us or a group surprises us. That's what I love. And that's what drives the creative of the show. It took many, many years of the evolution of the show. And it took me several years when I was given the chance to be, a leader on the show, to start to realize, where do I want the show to go? What would I want if I were doing this? I don't just want a game. That's not enough. I can play a game anywhere. I want an experience. And the way you get the experience is you have to agree to play the game.
Yeah. Can you talk a little bit more about that? Because that's something that is definitely in the show now, about how it's about the experience and about the journey of the contestants, and maybe not as much focused on the game while it's still there. How did you and the creative team come to making that such a big part of the show?
I think it does go back to your first question. When you think about the pandemic, it wasn't just COVID. Black Lives Matter was happening. There was political unrest. Me Too was still really prominent. So there was all of this cultural change happening, and all of it needed, but a lot of it very heavy. And for me, I really like joy. I do. I like love. I like having fun, and I'm grateful that I get to be alive and all that corny stuff. So when we were reimagining the show, I was reimagining positivity. I wanted
Yeah.
Survivor, and I speak for our team. I say I way too many times, but I mean all of us. We wanted the show to bring positivity in a way that families could sit down and say, this will be fun. Let's watch it. The kids want to watch it. We want to watch it. That doesn't mean you can't still talk about sensitive topics. Clearly, we do. And we did in Survivor 41, and we did in Survivor 42. It also doesn't mean you can't root for and against people, because you can, and you do it every season. And it doesn't mean there can't be delicious and brutal blindsides. That's the whole game design. So we designed the game with a beware advantage to do two things. One, it is going to turn the game. It's going to. The minute you pick it up, the game is going to change in some way, guaranteed. And two, it's fun. That's why it says beware. So when you're at home, you're like, damn, I don't know if I'd pick it up. Would you pick it up? I'm picking it up. You got to pick it up.
Yeah.
So that's where the fun came. And then when we were out there, the show had shifted in another way. George Cheeks, who runs all of CBS, he made this proclamation that diversity is no longer if you can, it is you will. And that's one of the biggest things that's changed Survivor. And it can go like, oh yeah, I get it. It's significant. because he forced us to change our casting process. He forced us to look in the mirror and say, are you really a representation of our country? You're not. Why don't we do that? And it changed everything because we started finding all these stories of people who said, well, I never would apply, but then I saw somebody who looked like me or talked like me or had a background like me. And then those stories felt important. Like, here's somebody who's overcoming something. And I'm aware that we can go too far that way. And we're trying to balance that all the time. But Survivor is a flowing,
Mhm.
it really is kind of like a river of creativity for us, Rob. And so we're just trying to navigate.
You know, something that I have observed over the years, almost 25 years of the show's history, it's sort of like that in the beginning of Survivor, and you were such a pioneer in terms of reality TV, but it was almost like in the beginning, what are these people willing to do to win $1 million? And let's
Right.
see what, maybe there's like a darker side of the human condition that might get explored in this type of a format. But as you mentioned with the positivity, and then also the sportsmanship that really is a big part of the show. It's almost like that over 25 years that Survivor has kind of like shifted from like, okay, this is what it could be like on the negative side to where there's a lot of
Mm.
negativity in the rest of the world. And Survivor has sort of like shifted to like you kind of wished that there were other people with important jobs that like behaved in the manner of which the Survivor contestants treat each other.
Wow. That was pretty powerful to hear because you put a thought in my head as you were talking, which is by merely changing the type of twists we put into the game, we can create negativity. It's a manipulation. And it's how are you going to, what's the conceit of the show? And you're right, I'm not interested in that anymore. And I think it's a direct reflection not only of where the show was, but of how it needed to evolve. And you had Mark Burdett in the beginning. Mark loves to get people looking at each other and saying, oh, no, it was you. No, it was you. That's what he brought. And it worked. I mean, the first person to win was one of the biggest villains still of all time, Richard Hatch. Mark understood something. And in the hands of somebody else, I can tell you for sure, Rob, there would be more villains, more negativity, more yelling at each other. It's just not where it's not going to happen when I'm part of the show. I'm just not interested in it. There's too many other things we could do and still have fun. And I hear all the time from people, I'm too soft. And I am bringing back my edge. I'm aware that I got a little soft. And so I am going to put a knife in the bag of rice every so often. And I can
Yeah.
still find that part of me. But generally speaking, I like where the show is. And I hear from enough families that say, we love Survivor. We love
Yeah.
it. We want our kids to see it. We like them. They think about, we like them imagining that they could be on the show and all that stuff. So this goes back to the same thing. There are people probably listening to this interview right now going, that's why Survivor sucks. Probst. I get it. You might be right. If you don't like it, you probably are right. A lot of it's going to come from me.
You know, that I have, listened to all of your podcasting and you do a really great job. And you do come back to that, the people that say Jeff sucks. And it must be very difficult to get like a million different data points of everybody has an opinion on the show. And I get that on a much, 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 much more micro level, even doing what I do. Like, how do you navigate among like all of this like information that comes at you about the job that you do or that how the show is?
Well, it took a long time for me to realize I can't let it be personal because I used to get upset and then I would sit in a hole and be like, God, why do they hate me? Why do they think that idea? And then one day there was a season 30, and we did our premiere. And I remember being so proud of the premiere that once again, we came up with the name of the season. We came up with a really cool opening um, challenge that had decision points. And those things are hard to do over and over. And then I read a review and they said, ah. And I realized in that moment, all right, here's the problem with taking things personally. If you believe the good and think that it means something, then you have to equally give same credence to the bad. And what I realized in that moment was I like that premiere. And if you like it, I'm glad because I like it. And if you don't like it, I get it. I like it. So it wasn't, I realized it shouldn't change me at all. And that helped me have a little more Teflon that I can take it. You don't like it. It's okay. I like it. And so that allowed me to kind of look at what you just said as the data points and realize that's a good one. Like change history. That was all me. I loved the name of that twist for years. I knew it didn't work, but Survivor 41 came and I shoved it in. And we did it, and then we did it again. And then everybody said, we hated it once, we hated it twice. And I went, wow, that was a terrible decision by me. And we pulled it out. But you only know you're on the edge of the cliff when you fall off it.
Yeah. I wanted to go back to from talking about the people that really discovered the show during the pandemic. You know, something that like was probably also like we never could have imagined way back when. And I speak from experience that Survivor was a thing, and it was on it used to be on Thursdays. It was on Thursday night, and then it happened, and then that was it. And unless you taped it, forget it. There was no such thing as going back and rewatching a season of Survivor. I guess you could go buy the DVDs, and you
Right.
could have like on your bookshelf, okay, let me see if I could find the DVD. So it wasn't until only about like really, 5 or 6 years ago that people started to have like the ability to even go back and do it on CBS All Access and ultimately Paramount Plus. And then Netflix really changed everything in
Yeah.
2020. So Jeff, how has it changed the way that you all make the show, where that you have these contestants? First, just I wanted to ask about the contestants. Like, it would be wild if somebody like on Survivor 35 said, "Oh yeah, I watched the whole show." It'd be like, "Oh my God, you just blew my mind." Where now every single person who comes in
Right.
has binged the whole show.
Yeah. I think it would, well, so for us, it doesn't change how we make the show at all. Not one bit. We don't have a master plan. We don't know where we're going in season 60. We're just trying to get through season 46, and then we see where we're at. We start meeting creatively. So for us, it doesn't change anything. But for the player, I think you're absolutely right. It changes everything because you can study now. And if I were a player, I would obviously be studying and having a history of like, what do they tend to do? Reminding myself that doesn't necessarily mean anything. But the two big questions I would do is when you see a mistake, what you decide is a mistake, whether it's strategic or social, ask yourself how you would exploit it. If you were there and you picked up on it, what's the move? Because that's the game. How to take somebody else's weakness and make it your advantage. And the other thing I would do is ask your friends, what are my weaknesses? Tell me the truth. What drives you crazy about me so that you can try to catch it. I mean, it's hard to overwhelm your own personality and be somebody else. But those are the things I think watching up 40, 5 seasons of Survivor can help you with, is because Rob, people used to say to me in the early seasons, why do they keep making these same mistakes? And I asked myself the same question. And then I realized they're not making mistakes. It's their nature.
Mhm.
That's all it is. It's a mistake to you, but to them, it's the right move. It's who I am.
Because it used to be like you would come in and have a season and have maybe like 3 or 4 people that really knew the show. But now it's almost like a non-starter. If you don't know the show, you don't get on the show. Almost every single person comes in and is like a super fan.
Well, that wasn't like a this decision, but there was a tipping point where we decided that we're at a point now where if you don't know the show, you're gonna gum up the works. You're
Mhm.
not gonna win, so it's a wasted spot. You won't win because you're not gonna get there. It just won't work. And instead, you're not gonna understand that three of a kind beats two pair. And so it's going to mess up the game. And that's really why we still meet people who apply and say, I'm new. I just watched the season and I saw Jeff say I should apply, so I'm applying. You can still get on, but we tell you've got to learn the game quickly because you won't have a chance. And I like where we're at right now. And the other part, Rob, is I don't think you could do a season where nobody had ever heard of Survivor and you got to re-experience season one. I just think we've been around so long that you have some idea what Survivor is.
Something that I don't think I've ever heard you address about the seasons that people can now consume them on a binge as opposed to week.
Mm,
Does that change the way that you all construct the show at all from how you used to, where people only consumed it week to week? Like, is there any way that the
yeah.
show is constructed to be consumed at a later date on a binge?
No, it's a good question, but I think you're chasing your tail then, because you just have to make a show that works, that just it works. Like,
Hmm.
you know, sometimes we'll have a schedule change and we'll have to do something different. That's something we have to solve for. It's a problem because the experience, we want the experience to be there. If you're going to watch Wednesday night at 8 o'clock, the second it comes on, we want it to be there for you in the way you want it. And if you're going to wait 4 weeks, that's fine. CBS has to figure out how the ratings work and what to charge advertisers. I don't worry about that. I love our audience. I know they're loyal. I know they'll come back and let us try again. So we just want, whenever you watch it, 1 hour at a time, 90 minutes at a time, the whole season at a time, to have the experience. I do think it changes the viewing experience. I remember hearing Bryan Cranston and Vince Gilligan talk about Breaking Bad, and I can't repeat it. It was really elegant how they said it, but they basically said the difference between watching that character evolve into a drug dealer over years versus watching him become a drug dealer in one weekend is a very different emotional experience. I do think that probably happens on Survivor, that it's a little more like, give me more versus where's it going? Oh, wow. And now this is where it's at. I can't wait for next week.
So Jeff, we talked about Winners at War being like such a, big culmination of the first era of, or the like the previous era of Survivor. Now, we're only a couple seasons away from another potential milestone in 50. That
Right.
is there a way that, but how could you ever top Winners at War
Yeah.
where you have 20 of the best winners come back?
It's a great problem to try to solve. And I don't have the answer. I don't know if that's the way you should look at it, because form follows function in the Survivor world. And I drive everyone crazy by repeating that over and over and over. The shape it takes has to be secondary to what it is you're wanting to accomplish.
Hmm.
So we're not going to do another season of winners. I mean, that just, you're right, that we don't have enough and it wouldn't make sense. So we have to see when we get there what would be fun to do for 50.
Yeah.
And it's a great question, and it's one that we're all contemplating and thinking about. And this is not deflecting. We don't have the answer. You know, right now we're starting creative on 47 and 48. Then we have to do 49. I mean, there's still a lot of Survivor we have to produce to even get to 50. And we have to be good every episode. Every act break has to be great. We never, to your point earlier, we have never said, that'll work. Never. We will go back into the editing bays and say, that person needs to talk about what happens if that doesn't happen, not if this doesn't happen. Let's shift the story that way. And then we all look at it and go, that feels like the story we want to tell. So we're really inside it most of the time, and then every so often we step back out and go, okay, 50's coming. What are we going to do?
Yeah, I think it's also hard where, there's so much of a focus on like the journey of the players to then do that with returnees, where I feel like that so much of their journey is like already, we may already know it. So it's not necessarily that every single person has like a new journey unless they've like lost in like some
But
like
Rob,
soul crushing.
here's how you change that. The show starts and I say, all right, the new era has focused a lot on journeys, how you can work together while still voting each other out without hating each other. It's been some amazing blind sides. You've all done that. Let's play Survivor. Let's get dirty. We're going to give you a game that allows you to do everything you want to do. You don't have to think about anything. No journey, no nothing. Get out here, kick ass, and win this game. Let's go. Give people permission to play. We can do that. We're not having them play right now.
Mhm.
It's really, like you said earlier, there's not so much gameplay. Tremendous gameplay. You're going to see in Survivor 46 one of the most vicious seasons ever. I'm telling you, the gameplay is great. It's where we focus our story. We may focus a little more on the journey right now, and maybe we'll start shifting out of that in the same way that I'm going to start hitting the bag of rice with a knife. But the gameplay is still happening, and I think when 46 is over, you will feel that.
Okay. Well, look, you don't need to sell us because 100% of the people that listen to this are going to be there for you for Survivor 46.
I'm not worried about that. I'm just saying that the
We're
gameplay is
excited.
there.
Yeah. Um, so let me ask you, for people like me who do what I do and talk about the show, I would love to get some feedback from you, Jeff, that what are the ways that when we're outside talking about the show and we only have a piece of the story or like the 90-minute episode that we've just seen, how could we do a better job in talking about the show with the audience?
There's the question I've never been asked in 24 years and thousands of interviews. Never once has a journalist said what you just said or asked what you just asked. I appreciate the question. I would say ask why. Just wonder why they did that, because there's an intention behind everything we do. I mean it. It may sound like just words, but there's a reason. Anytime we do a game, there's a reason. Like there's a game coming up in 46, and it's a very simple risk reward game, but there was a reason behind it. A very simple reason, but there's a reason. So I would say you can still be an armchair quarterback. You can still sling arrows saying, I hated that. I think this season sucks. That player should have never been on. But maybe you just ask, or you write me and say, why? Why did you do that? Not why would you do that?
Mhm.
Why did you do it? Because that's all we're really doing is trying to create a game. This is the way we kind of think of the game, Rob. Let's create and design a game that makes it impossible for the person who has all the skills to win be able to win. So the more advantages you have in your invisible knapsack, the more difficult it's going to be. So how do you solve that problem? I already know you're witty. You just told a funny joke. I already know you're physical. I can see your muscles. I already know you're charming. You're talking to everybody. So I'm going to take you out. How do you avoid that? That's the game we're designing. So everything we put into it comes from that. How do we make that game? That's why it's in the game.
Anything else about Survivor 46 that you want to tease us with today?
46 is definitely an eclectic group. And I know you could say, well, they're always eclectic by
Mhm.
design, but this group just has a funny sense of humor about it. And there's a lot of music this season, just weirdly,
Okay.
either people who play music or sing. And so there's kind of just a loose musical thread, a lot of fun. And I think, and I will listen to see what you think when the season's over, but I think this might be the first season of the new era where the players have started to take control and they're starting to realize, there are other ways to handle a beware advantage. There are things I could do with my shot in the dark. I'm not saying those in particular, but just meaning from a philosophical point of view, they're starting to be less afraid of the game and starting to look at the game and figure out how to break it and use it to their advantage. And I think you're going to see some really great gameplay. And it all echoes back to our original design in Survivor 41: create uncertainty at all points of the game. Uncertainty, 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 uncertainty. And in the beginning, people said, wow, there's too much. There's too many twists. There's too much of that, too much of this. We anticipated that. But our thought was, if we can get the players to understand you're going to live in a world of uncertainty, then that'll give you the freedom to just play. Let it
Mhm.
be the wild, wild west, because you can't predict. And so that's what I think is happening, is that the uncertainty reigns supreme. And that gives someone like you the permission to say, if I can't predict, let me just adapt quickly.
Jeff, I really appreciate you making time to talk about all this stuff. I think it's all fascinating. I could listen to you talk about this for hours and hours. So I think that the listeners must appreciate it also. So thank you so much, Jeff.
And I want to say, Rob, I appreciate how much time you put into thinking about this conversation. I can tell you did. I really appreciate it. I enjoyed this
I
chat a
didn't want
lot.
to screw it up, Jeff.
You didn't, not by my end. I really enjoyed it.
And maybe I had too much I wanted to get in. But that's relatable, right?
Yes, exactly. And we'll just end on the same point we hit all the time: is point of view. Point of view. You have a point of view. I now understand a little more about why you do it the way you do it, because I've now been trying to learn how to do a podcast and realize we have to have a point of view on that podcast. You have one on
Yeah.
yours. You have one. And I'll tell just a quick story as we hang up. We did a screening in New York several months ago for a few people. You came and we did a silly game where we were going to give away some tickets to something. But I asked you, what do you think of that? And without missing a beat, you said it was too long. You were right. I could have done it in one round. But my why was, we're only doing this once. Let's make it fun and give you another chance, the losers bracket. But from a producer standpoint, you were 100% right. You should have done it one round and we should have got to the screening a little quicker. You have a point of view. I appreciate it.
I agonized inside, Jeff, because I didn't want to bring negativity to what you were doing, but I thought that maybe you might respect more to hear how I really felt about the thing. So I went with the audacious route to say what I actually thought, but I hoped I did not offend you in that moment.
Rob, that was my whole point, is I gave you my why, and then you said, got it. Here's what I would change. That's a perfect marriage of analysis and creativity.
Yeah. All right. Well, Jeff, thank you so much. Really appreciate it. Best of luck with the new season, and just keep on stabbing those bags of rice and and doing what you love to do.
All right, Rob. Talk again later.
All right. Take care, Jeff. Bye. All right, everybody, there you have it. Jeff Probst here on the podcast. Thank you to Jeff, CBS, and all of you for being a part of a very special 5,000th episode of Rob Has a Podcast. Really, really cool. If you're new to the channel, won't you hit that subscribe button and come with us on our journey here together at Rob Has a Podcast for all of our favorite reality TV shows that we're trying to bring together, people around the world who love these shows as much as we do. So to all of our longtime listeners and patrons, thank you so much for your support. This has been the great joy of my life to make Rob Has a Podcast. Can't wait to get into the next 5,000 episodes of the podcast here with you on Rob Has a Podcast.